Hello everyone, my name is Borgias and today I bring you a new episode of Assassin's Creed: The Real History, the series where we compare the representations of groups and other elements depicted within one of the Assassin's Creed games to their actual history. Please be warned of major story spoilers ahead. For today's episode, we will be analyzing the history of the Borgia family. To begin this episode, we'll be covering their pre-game history, which will inform us on their origins prior to Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, then their in-game history, which we see depicted throughout the game's stories, and lastly we will analyze the differences between the events depicted in the game to their real historical events. Starting with the pre-game history, the Borgia family's rise in Italy is usually associated first with the actions of Alfonso Borja. Born in Spain, Alfonso received an extensive education which eventually led him to graduate from university and later pursue his livelihood through the church. His talents led him to serve Alfonso V of Aragon, who first made him his secretary, then envoy, then vice-chancellor, and even his regent in times of war. Alfonso's political prowess and dealings with the church led him to become a priest and bishop. He eventually helped the king gain papal approval concerning his rights over Naples, for which he was made a cardinal. In 1445, in his late 60s, Alfonso moved to Rome and adopted an Italian version of his name, Alfonso Borgia. Not long after, he brought some of his family to Rome, including his youngest nephew, Rodrigo. By mid-1455, following the death of Pope Nicholas V, Alfonso was chosen as a compromise candidate by most factions, as he was seen to be rather impartial to any specific side, and therefore he was made Pope Calixtus III. Although he was generally unbiased and fair, Calixtus III followed the tradition of raising his family as he promoted multiple family members in the church, including his nephew Rodrigo, who was made a cardinal when he was only 25 years old. Calixtus eventually died in 1458, and despite his time in the papacy being short, many praised his decisions, aside from those related to nepotism. Following the passing of his uncle, Rodrigo, who was the youngest of the cardinals, played a strategic role in aiding the new pope, Pope Pius II, in getting elected. This involved a lot of risk on his part, since if his adversary was elected, Rodrigo's progression in the church may have come to an end. He was successful, however, and as an important ally to the new pope, he was made vice-chancellor. Unfortunately, Rodrigo followed this victory with what some considered to be inappropriate behavior, such as purchasing property to increase his wealth and developing relationships with various women. Although he was eventually reprimanded for his actions, Rodrigo did not seek to improve himself, but instead rather hid his indiscretions. It was in this time that he fathered his most infamous children with his mistress Vannozza dei Catani. These were Giovanni, or Juan, Cesare, Lucrezia, and Goffredo Borgia. It would have been around this following period where we would have first met Rodrigo Borgia in Assassin's Creed 2, as his political sway within the church continued to historically grow. As another pope eventually took power in 1484, Rodrigo did not seek to challenge him for the position, and instead further increased his connections and alliances in the meantime, while also aiding his family to grow in power. In 1492, following the death of Pope Innocent VIII, Rodrigo made his move. Many believe that he either paid off or offered positions of power to his remaining rivals, because despite most of the conclave initially being against his rise to the papacy, in the end Rodrigo Borgia was elected as Pope Alexander VI on August 11, 1492. After establishing the parameters of his papacy, Alexander did not waste any time in displaying further acts of nepotism, as he made his 17-year-old son, Cesare, the Archbishop of Valencia, and made his other son, Giovanni, the Duke of Gandia and Gonfaloniere of the church. In addition, the Pope elevated many of his other family members to positions of power, including Juan de Borja el Mayor, who was promoted as a cardinal nephew and was also depicted as one of Cesare's generals and the papal banker later in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Rodrigo eventually took the opportunity to marry his daughter Lucrezia to Giovanni Sforza to solidify an alliance with this other powerful Italian family. Within 4 years, however, as the alliance proved worthless to the Borgia Pope, the marriage was declared invalid since it was claimed to have never been consummated, despite the fact that Lucrezia was pregnant at the time of these inquiries. Soon after, the humiliated Giovanni Sforza claimed in response that Lucrezia had participated in incestuous acts with her father and brother, charges that would remain a rumor of this infamous family to this very day. In 1494, following increased political strain with France, King Charles VIII invaded Italy with the goal of taking Naples. Although he initially supported the French attack, the Pope soon changed sides when he married his son Goffredo to the granddaughter of the King of Naples, with the goal of increasing his influence on the College of Cardinals. His plan initially succeeded since he was now able to create 12 new cardinal positions, including one that he gave to his 18-year-old son Cesare. Over time, despite Italian resistance, the French king soon arrived in Rome, after Alexander VI had tried to oppose him. Instead of risking being deposed by the French king for simony, he manipulated the Bishop of St. Malo by making him a cardinal, and in turn, this new cardinal used his influence on the French king to convince him to move on from Rome and continue to Naples. Once they were free of the French, who captured Naples, the Pope created a holy league of the other Italian states against them, and they were successful in forcing the foreign troops to retreat. Soon after, the Borgia Pope decided to try and lower the influence of rivaling families in the church, specifically the Orsini, for which he recalled his son Giovanni Borgia from Spain. Officially making him the captain general of the papal army, the Pope had his son attempt to decrease Orsini influence throughout military action, which he partially succeeded in doing. Unfortunately for the Borgias, the Orsini soon bought their way back into power. However, Giovanni still received many accolades for what most considered to be mediocre accomplishments, which further alienated the other military commanders. On June 14, 1497, Giovanni was murdered by an unknown assailant, with certain historians hypothesizing that Cesare may have been the murderer, as was implied in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. In 1498, Lucrezia gave birth to her first child, who she named Giovanni Borgia. Later that year, she would marry her second husband, Alfonso of Aragon, which would further solidify the Borgia alliance with the newly established Kingdom of Naples. Together they would have another son named Rodrigo of Aragon in 1499. However, their marriage would end abruptly in 1500 when Alfonso was murdered while in Rome. Once again, much speculation surrounds his death, as some claim that it may have either been Cesare's hand or the hand of his assassin Micheletto Corella. However, neither of these cases were ever proven. Back in 1498, Cesare Borgia became the first person in history to resign as a cardinal, and after a year of service, he was made the new captain general of the papal armies in 1499. He then began a large-scale military campaign in Romagna by order of the Church to further establish the control and dominance of the papal states. Following military successes in Imola and Forli, along with further political maneuvering, Cesare's army grew, and he was soon rewarded with the titles of the Duke of Romagna and Gonfaloniere of the Church. His conquests did not end here, however, as Cesare pushed forward with papal influence, attacking and conquering more cities. He is even known to have executed some of his generals for plotting against his military decisions. Meanwhile, in 1502, the Pope decided once again to establish new alliances, for which he therefore married off his daughter Lucrezia to Alfonso I d'Este, Duke of Ferrara, with whom she would stay with for the rest of her life, eventually having 8 children together. In 1503, Pope Alexander VI dined with Cesare and Cardinal Adriano de Corneto, and a few days later they all fell ill. Although Cesare, who had left Rome, was saved by a drastic medical procedure, his father the Pope died on August 18, 1503. After recovering, Cesare learned of his father's death and was eventually reaffirmed as the Gonfaloniere of the Church under his successor, Pope Pius III. Unfortunately, this new pro-Borgia Pope died 26 days later, and he was replaced by Pope Julius II, formerly known as Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere, the arch-rival of Rodrigo Borgia and his entire family. Although Cesare tried to mend the relationships with the new pope, he was unsuccessful, leading to the seizure of his lands by the papacy and his subsequent arrest in 1504. He later escaped, was recaptured, and escaped again, eventually reaching his ally, King John III of Navarre, in 1506. While serving this new king, he led an attack on the city of Viana, which led to his eventual death when he was fatally injured in the fighting. With the fall of the Borgias complete, the 2 remaining recognized children of the Pope continued their lives more so outside of the public eye. Lucrezia would live in isolation in Ferrara until 1519, when she would die from complications following childbirth, while Goffredo would eventually remarry after the death of his wife and have 4 children while living in Aragon. Therefore, throughout their rise and fall, the Borgia family left behind a significant legacy and mark on Italian history as a whole. Their infamy and corruption remain some of the most remembered parts of their history and is the reason why they played such a large role between Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. In summary, there were quite a few notable differences between the actual Borgia family and their representation in the Assassin's Creed series. First, it should be noted that although they did play many manipulative political games, they were not involved in the Pazzi conspiracy in Florence, nor the murder of the Venetian Doge. Secondly, their quest for power was not further pushed by a need to locate and use pieces of Eden, but instead an attempt was made by the family to establish themselves and their descendants in an extended position of power and importance. Thirdly, although there are many internal conflicts recorded between the family members, most of the larger events, such as the murders of Giovanni Borgia and Alfonso of Aragon, the supposed incestuous relationships with Lucrezia, and the death of the Pope, cannot be directly explained as they were in Assassin's Creed. The games gave definitive answers on these questions, when in reality no real answer was ever provided, and these matters all remained speculative in one way or another. Lastly, it should be considered that none of the family members were part of the Templar Order, and that the Assassin Order had no effect on their actual history. Although I imagine that breaking things down, I could extend this list exponentially to cover tons of minor differences between each family member and their depiction in the game, I feel that these are the larger differences between the depiction of the family as a whole and their actual history. If you're interested in going into more detail, be sure to check out the videos covering the individual members of the Borgia family. In conclusion, even though there were significant uses of creative license when portraying this controversial family in the Assassin's Creed series, I personally found that the writers did a great job filling in most of the ambiguities with their fictional story and fitting it all in nicely with the actual history while only changing certain minor aspects. And with that final fact, we have finished this special episode of Assassin's Creed: The Real History. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, I highly recommend you try out one of the Assassin's Creed games. Please feel free to leave me a comment of what you think about these wider types of episodes and if it's something you'd like to see me continue. Thank you all for watching. Please leave any suggestions for future characters, groups or factions, events, or locations from any of the Assassin's Creed games that you'd like me to cover in the comment section below. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you all in a future historical episode.
If I want to live, I live. If I want to take, I take. If I want you to die, you die!